Hi there, everybody. I am Taylor of the Sheepish Goat. Hi there, everybody. I am Taylor of the Sheepish Goat. Hi there, everybody. I'm Taylor of the Sheepish Goat. You're watching the channel. So, I know I'm overthinking today because I've tried to redo this intro like 4 times because I have a lot of concepts in my brain that I want to try to share that I've not really talked about out loud before. So, aside to myself a little bit and my therapist, let's talk about what we're going to talk about. The framework for this video is how we make sense of our life. And the way in which we do that is through a few different processes. All of them are innate, aside for one, essentially. And we're going to talk about kind of how they function and the pluses and minuses of each of those. In a general sense, how we take in new information is through perception. Perception is looking at the world around us, hearing things, seeing things, feeling things, and taking in that raw data. In and of itself, I would say it's more objective. It has nothing to do really with feeling. It has all to do with the raw material. Now, it can be somewhat subjective depending on, are you colorblind? Are you incapable of feeling physical contact with things, right? So there are methods in which it can be altered, but in and of itself, it is raw data. So what does that mean? Well, I have some tools here today. This is an object. If you perceive it and you know nothing about it, this is a small thing that fits in my hand. It's got maybe a little bit of a curve to it. Okay, that's interesting. The next function we're going to talk about is apperception. So perception is the raw material, right? Apperception is your learned information about an object based on experience. This is where subjectivity starts to come in. So you might have learned in a book, in school, that this is yellow. There's some green in it, but primarily this is yellow. It does have a curved shape. We might know from our perception that we could eat this. And in knowing that, we might say that it's a fruit. So it's a yellow fruit. It's got a curve to it. It's got these striations running down the side. I have learned that this is a banana. And this gets us to our third form. Our third form is schema. Schema is patterning. Schema is essentially shortcuts, annotations, the building blocks from which we form our quick understanding of material. So, my apperception is I understood the color. I understood how it looks. I understood that it's a fruit. My schema is taking that information and quantifying into banana. Through that, I know that this is edible. I know that it's yellow. I know that it's a fruit. I know it grows in a tree. I know a lot of things about it. And all of this is shorthand information for your brain to quickly identify, process, and be able to respond to the world around you. Now, your schema might have you know that a banana you peel. You pull it down, you peel individual sides, and you can eat it. But to the point of apperception and schema, they are entirely subjective. The way you experience the world, your experiences, is entirely different than mine. So my schema lets me know that you can pull a banana in half. Thanks, Grandpa. So if you eat a banana, you can experience it different ways. Don't worry, I will eat the banana later. Perception, we see the thing. Apperception, we understand things about it based on our own experience, what we've learned previously. From there, we take all of that information, quantify it into schema, into that building block, into that foundational core knowledge. But how does this change, right? Because these things aren't entirely fixed, and they're not entirely positive for that regard. This is a glass. I I know that it's green. I know that it has ice in it. You might look at this, and based on your own past experiences, you might assume this is Gatorade. You might assume this is Mountain Dew. That is iced pickle juice. And while I like pickle juice, that's strong. I deliberately didn't try that beforehand for the sake of that argument. Schema, learned information, right, isn't always correct. These are assumptions to shorthand, to have quick responses to the material around us. So when I look at this and I think, oh, this is Gatorade, this is Mountain Dew, this is going to be delicious, but it doesn't always taste like what you think it does. That's why sometimes you try food and you think it's going to be one way and it totally shocks you. But once you know what it is, the taste doesn't taste so bad. The taste is understandable. You learn to expect what is happening then, right? Your schema aligns properly. But like I said, just because it's learned doesn't mean that it's positive. It doesn't mean that it's to your benefit. It can be negatively impacting because schema in itself is your patterning, and your patterning is shaped by your experience. So what happens is that your schema forms a filter. So you look at the world in one way. You form a schema and you're suddenly looking at the world another way. You might be looking at the world through a lens. Suddenly the world looks a little bit different because your schema and your past experiences is shaping your perspective. Now what that means, not only has your schema formed because of your apperception, but your new apperceptions are altered because of your schema. So because this lens is over your eyes, any new information you take in is going to be affected by that lens. It limits what you can take in because it has formed an egoic response to your past. So it can be protective. In the sake of ego, ego is there to shield you from the world, to prevent you from experiencing something necessarily. Let's take an example. Let's say I call myself a good person. Okay. In and of itself, calling myself a good person sounds like a nice thing. Sounds like a positive affirmation. And it can be. But how can that be a bad thing? If I formulated myself as being a good person, then what happens when I don't feel like a good person? What happens when I don't feel like I am aligned with myself? There's a couple of things. One, I can feel disconnected from myself if I do something that feels unaligned with who I am. That's not me. I would never do that. Why do I feel so terrible? Well, one, because we've limited our beliefs. We've put ourselves into a category, into a schema, that building block of this is who we are. If we deviate from that, we suddenly feel completely inauthentic. Now, perhaps you have done something bad, but moreover, you've limited your own internal belief systems, so therefore you are unable to see yourself in a different light. Now, in the exact opposite vein, if you've called yourself a good person, you might be blind to any wrongdoings that you have done to other people in your life. If you perceive yourself as one way and say, I'm a good person, I've never done anything bad, you're ignoring all of the actual effect you've had on the world because you've limited your view to I am this thing. Therefore, I am infallible. Therefore, I am incapable of hurting other people. My actions affect me. My actions don't affect you. You're responsible for your own feelings and your own subjective understanding of the world. That's not inherently true. So, good person, bad person, assumptions. These are how perception, apperception, and schema can affect your overall understanding. So, what is the fourth thing? Well, the fourth thing is your introspection. Your introspection is highly important. If you look at me, right? Let's look at me. I am a person. That's what you perceive. You might have apperceptions to understand that I'm Taylor. You might have apperceptions to think that I talk too much, or that I'm funny, or that I change my hair a lot. Those might be the apperceptions you have about me. The overall understanding is that I'm a guy who talks about things online. I'm an emotional person, and I have a YouTube channel. That might be the schema or the framework in which you view me. But you might have an emotional response as well. You might smile when you see me. You might be upset when you see me. You might call me creepy, as I recently got in a recent comment on one of my posts. Thanks, buddy. The point is that how we view the world is entirely subjective. So we can't fully understand how other people are going to react to us, to others, why they feel the way they do. Sometimes they just do. But we can understand ourselves. So if apperception and schema are logical processes, right? It's a quick understanding of I feel this way, this is what this is, X is X. Introspection is internal investigation. Introspective thoughts are looking at feelings, looking at the reasons why we feel that way. Why do I feel bad in calling myself a good person? Why do I feel fear? Why do I feel anxiety when I'm around this certain person? Why am I happy whenever I see this person? A lot of people feel these things, right? We have a schema around us. Someone has hurt us in our life, so every time we see them, we feel a certain thing. Now, that is more understandable. But why then do we enact patterns onto other people in our lives? If someone did this to me, my body forms an egoic response. That means that I form a schema around this type of interaction. So if I sense this, not intentionally, but if I sense this through my schema, through this filter, with a new apperception, a new understanding of something happening, my body filters it through that past event, through that past pain, through that past trauma, even sometimes through a positive lens when it shouldn't be, because it's conditioned to have a quick response to protect us or to help us say, this is good, this is bad. So if we've had that experience, we will project that pain onto the next event, onto the next person, onto the next relationship, onto the next job, forever and ever. Introspection allows us to understand why we do things. Introspection allows us to look at why we're acting a way and address that schema. Being confronted with a pattern in yourself, with a schema, can be very painful because it not only impacts that instance, but it impacts every other thing. As I said, apperception creates schema, but schema, once in place, permanently affects all the following apperceptions related to that thing. So you're not only looking at the one event you've done bad, you're looking at everything else that has trickled through and spiderwebbed because of that previous event. Being aware of the things that you've done, or the way you're reacting to certain items, or the way you're not showing up, the way you're limiting yourself, the way you don't talk in a certain situation, the way you always take this job, the way you always date these people, the way you are limiting your beliefs, subconsciously typically, unless you're a very intuitive and introspective person. These aren't inherently wrong. No one's saying you're bad because of these things. Again, your body forms these innately to protect you. But introspection allows you to break those down. Introspection allows you to say, shit, I may have made a mistake, or I see now why I've been acting this way. I see now why I can't seem to do this one thing right ever, and I just never could get it before. It doesn't mean it's easy. It can be very hard. Looking at yourself critically and assessing why you do things is very challenging. But it is the way in which we learn, and it's the way in which we form new schema or break that old one so we can generate a new one and learn how to better approach our lives, how we make sense of the world around us, and how that always is changing, as long as we are open to allow change to occur. If we keep our eyes closed to the process, if we keep our eyes closed to perception, apperception, schema, and introspection, we don't understand why we learn. We don't understand why we react and how we process. But in doing that, in taking time, and looking at yourself, and going to therapy, and being an intuitive and introspective person, you can better your life. The goal is not to, quote unquote, better other people's lives. You can help people. But your goal is to better your life, how you function, how you move through the world. And in bettering yourself, you will secondarily help other people around you. It's the help yourself first in the plane crash scenario before helping your child. So, this is how we make sense of the world. And that's the video I wanted to make today. I do want to say a shout out to my therapist V, who helped me figure out exactly how to do this, because I didn't know what schema was before. I learned apperception recently and I wanted to make a video, but before I knew schema, I couldn't quite figure out how it worked. And that's because apperception and schema work so hand in hand. They sound very similar, but when you understand that one informs the other and they constantly play a back and forth role, they're vital to understanding both sides of that coin, so you know how your life is impacted by the events around you and how your brain naturally is trying to form patterns to help you long term. So I hope you found this helpful. I hope you learned something today. I hope it was a good watch. But until next time, everybody. See you then. Love you.